The sun beat down on the cracked asphalt. Heat shimmered up, distorting the view through her camera lens. Emma squinted, fiddling with the aperture, trying to find a balance between the blinding light and the deep shadows it cast. Her fingers, rough and calloused, moved with practiced ease. Still, every click of the dial, every adjustment of the focus felt wrong. It was like trying to tune a piano with a hammer. She lifted her head, pushing a stray strand of hair away from her eyes. The air hung heavy, thick with the smell of dust and exhaust fumes. Across the street, a group of children chased each other, their laughter echoing through the silence that had settled over her own world. She watched them, a dull ache in her chest, her finger hovering over the shutter button. The camera felt cold and alien in her hands, a tool she knew how to use, yet it brought no comfort, no solace. It only amplified the emptiness that had become her constant companion. A ghost of a memory surfaced, the feel of small, warm hands clutching at her own as she adjusted the lens for a family portrait. The memory brought a sharp pang of loss, a fresh wave of grief washing over her. A young family caught her eye, a mother, father, and 2 children, a boy and a girl, their laughter ringing out as they crossed the street towards her. The little girl held a brightly colored balloon that danced in the wind. Emma lifted her camera, her finger instinctively finding the shutter button. The lens felt cool against her skin, a stark contrast to the burning sun above. The family paused in front of a faded mural, the children's faces upturned in wonder. The father, noticing Emma, smiled and gestured towards her. She nodded, a forced smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She framed the shot, trying to capture the scene before her. The vibrant colors of the mural, the children's innocent joy, the parents' loving gazes. Yet as she looked through the viewfinder, a wave of nausea washed over her. The scene felt staged, artificial, the happiness, a cruel mockery of her own shattered world. She lowered the camera, her stomach churning. The click of the shutter, as she snapped the picture, felt like a betrayal of her own grief. The sun climbed higher, its rays turning the world into a blinding canvas of white and shadow. Emma moved through the streets, a solitary figure amidst the bustling crowd. Her eyes, hidden behind the safety of her camera lens, scanned the urban landscape, searching for what she didn't know. A shaft of sunlight pierced through the narrow gap between 2 buildings, illuminating a cloud of dust motes dancing in the air. She stopped, mesmerized by the interplay of light and shadow. The dust, normally an annoyance, now held a strange beauty, each particle a tiny world, reflecting the light in its own unique way. She raised her camera, her finger hovering over the shutter button. The light shifted, the dust motes swirling in the sudden breeze. The image, fleeting, ethereal, called to her. This, she thought, this I can capture. This raw, unfiltered moment of beauty in the midst of chaos. Her finger tightened on the shutter button, the click echoing in the silence of her own world. Hours melted away, the sun tracing a relentless path across the sky. Emma wandered from street to street, her camera a constant weight around her neck. She photographed everything and nothing. A stray dog scavenging for scraps, a lone flower pushing through a crack in the sidewalk, a crumpled piece of paper caught in the wind. Each click of the shutter a futile attempt to fill the void within. But the more she photographed, the more hollow she felt. The images, once her solace, now felt like empty shells, devoid of life, devoid of meaning. The world through her lens seemed to reflect her own inner turmoil, a chaotic jumble of light and shadow, devoid of clarity or purpose. Exhaustion settled deep in her bones. Her shoulders ached, her eyes burned, and her throat was parched. She longed to sit down, to close her eyes, to shut out the world and its relentless demands. But something kept her moving, a stubborn refusal to surrender to the despair that threatened to engulf her. She found herself in a park, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers. Children's laughter drifted from a nearby playground, their carefree joy a stark contrast to the leaden weight in her own heart. She sank onto a bench, the wood warm from the sun, and closed her eyes. Images flickered behind her eyelids, snapshots of a life that no longer existed. A picnic blanket spread out beneath a cloudless sky, the scent of barbecue smoke and sunscreen, the sound of her children's laughter as they chased each other through the park. Her husband's arm around her shoulders, his warmth a comforting presence. The memories, once a source of comfort, now felt like shards of glass, piercing her heart with their bittersweet beauty. She opened her eyes, the present crashing back in with the force of a tidal wave. The park, the children, the laughter. All of it served as a painful reminder of what she had lost. The emptiness within her yawned, a chasm that threatened to swallow her whole. Back in her small, dimly lit apartment, the silence was deafening. It pressed in on her, suffocating, amplifying the emptiness that had become her constant companion. She moved through the rooms like a ghost, her footsteps echoing on the bare wooden floor. Every corner, every object held a memory, a reminder of her loss. She found herself drawn to the old, worn leather case that held her husband's revolver. It was heavy in her hands, its coldness a stark contrast to the warmth of her memories. She traced the engraved initials on the handle. JW, a lump forming in her throat. John would have hated to see her like this, she thought. Broken, defeated. The weight of the gun, both literal and metaphorical, was a strange comfort. It offered a way out. A finality that both terrified and tempted her. She closed her eyes, her finger resting against the cold steel. A single, irreversible decision was all it would take. She drifted off to sleep, the weight of the gun still heavy in her hand. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of images and emotions. Faces swam before her eyes, their voices a jumbled chorus in her ears. Her children, their laughter echoing through the corridors of her mind. Her husband, his eyes filled with love and concern, but their warmth was fleeting. Soon the shadows returned, darker and more menacing. The car accident, the screeching of tires, the blinding flash of light, then silence. A silence more profound than any she had ever known. She woke with a gasp, her heart pounding against her ribs. The gun clattered to the floor, the sound sharp and final in the stillness of the room. She stared at it, her body trembling, her mind reeling from the onslaught of grief and terror. The dream, so vivid, so real, left her shaken to her core. It was a stark reminder of the finality of death, a finality she wasn't ready to face. The next morning, she woke to a gray, overcast sky. Rain threatened, the air thick with humidity. She stepped out of her apartment building, the cool air a welcome change from the stifling heat of her apartment. She had no destination in mind, no purpose other than to escape the suffocating silence of her own company. She wandered aimlessly, her camera hanging forgotten around her neck. Streets blurred into a monotonous parade of concrete and brick. The city, once a source of endless fascination, now felt oppressive, suffocating. As she rounded a corner, she noticed a flicker of movement in a narrow, trash-strewn alleyway. A stray cat, its fur matted and muddy, its ribs visible beneath its skin, stared at her with piercing green eyes. It was a creature on the margins, surviving on scraps and instinct. Yet, in its gaze, Emma saw a spark of defiance, a will to live. It was a look that resonated deep within her, stirring something that she thought had been extinguished. She raised her camera, her finger instinctively finding the shutter button. The cat, wary but unafraid, held its ground. As she peered through the viewfinder, the world shifted. The trash-strewn alley, the overcast sky, the cat's wary gaze. It all coalesced into a moment of unexpected beauty. It wasn't a perfect picture. It wasn't the kind of image that would win awards or garner praise, but it was honest, raw. It captured a fleeting moment of life in all its messy, imperfect glory. And in that moment, something within Emma shifted too. The weight of her grief didn't vanish. The pain of her loss still lingered. But for the first time since the accident, she felt a glimmer of something else. A spark of hope. A renewed sense of purpose. The camera, once a symbol of her loss, now felt different. It was a tool, yes, but also a lifeline. A way to connect with the world. To find beauty in unexpected places. The rain began to fall. Soft at first, then steadily intensifying. Emma didn't seek shelter. She stood there, letting the cool water wash over her, feeling the weight of the past few days begin to lift. It was as if the rain was washing away the layers of grief and despair that had clung to her for so long. She continued to photograph the cat, capturing its every move, the way it stalked a pigeon, its lithe body a study in focused intensity, the way it curled up in a discarded cardboard box, seeking shelter from the rain, the way its eyes, like green jewels, seemed to reflect the storm raging around them. Each click of the shutter, a small victory. The world, she realized, wasn't meant to be perfect. It was the imperfections, the flaws, the unexpected moments of grace that made life worth living. The cracks and crevices were where the light seeped in. As the storm subsided, a sense of calm settled over Emma. The world, washed clean by the rain, seemed to shimmer with a newfound clarity. She looked at the cat, now curled up asleep in its makeshift shelter, and felt a surge of gratitude. It had shown her something, reminded her of something she thought she'd lost forever. She wasn't sure what the future held. The pain of her loss wouldn't disappear overnight, but she knew she had to keep going. For herself, and for the memory of the family she had loved and lost. She had a purpose again, a reason to greet each new day, to capture the world in all its messy, imperfect beauty, to find the light in the shadows. As she turned to leave, a faint rainbow arced across the sky, a promise of hope painted across the canvas of the city. It was a new dawn, and Emma was ready to face it. Her camera, her constant companion, felt lighter now, no longer a burden but a tool of healing, a testament to the enduring power of life.